So this is a beautiful photo of Uncle Charlie Leechu up on Western Yallinji country in Cape York. So this is just an acknowledgement of country. Just like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land on which we are today, and pay respects to their past, present and future leaders, and also acknowledge the Indigenous people in the room. I don't know if I skipped something. So this is a little bit about ABCF and our vision. It was created in 2010 and there's 4 of us, and we're a not-for-profit, which makes us able to be more creative and innovative in how we put projects out in the market and stuff, which I'll talk about a bit later. And this is a photo of Stafford Yam up in Kowanyama doing their traditional burns. And one of the first, when I looked at the topic of conversation, when Tandy had emailed me about ways to create generational wealth whilst caring for countries, there was 3 topics that I chose that we work really closely with. This is the core benefits verification framework, and all of this I have copies of emails and stuff, so reach out to me afterwards and I'm happy to share those documents. But it was 2 years of research and development, and it was a way of looking at research and the monitoring and evaluation that suited mob instead of the other way around. So it was placing an Indigenous framework of how we used to learn into communities. So instead of like a thick report, like I think it's been said, you know, these reports sit in communities and nobody ever reads them. And it was pushing back on this notion that because Indigenous people didn't speak and write English, that was tied to intelligence. And it's pushing back on that, saying, well, Indigenous people, English is normally a second or a third language. So instead of writing a report, it's visual reporting, it's recording elders' stories. It's about how Indigenous people traditionally have learnt and monitored that what comes out of their communities, and allowing them the ability to own their IP, particularly in Cape York, the IP that has been taken out of the communities and used for, you know, purposes that don't suit the needs of the people in the community. This protects each individual's community to their IP. And it's a strengths-based approach. Working throughout Cape York for 25 years, quite often somebody from down south would come into a community and want to point out the deficits in those communities. So we push back on that and we use a strength-based approach. This is already an amazing, thriving community. Instead of going in there with a, oh, how do we fix it? How do we add and support to what the Indigenous people of the country want, rather than placing what we think they need over the top of it? It was adopted by the Human Rights Commission, the strengths-based approach. So yeah, it was a long process. We got a lot of pushback because there was a lot of people who were comfortable with the way things were going. Quite often, you know, Cape York specific, because that's where I was, we would get consultants from Canberra come into, or Canberra or Melbourne, if you're from Canberra. My dad's from there, I don't have a problem with Canberra, but it's where most consultants, you know, for Cape York came from. And they would come into Aboriginal communities and tell people whether they were doing business the right way or not. And quite often it was their first time in community, which was really disheartening and disempowering for people, so it was pushing back on that. Yeah, I could go on and on about it, but it went through 2 years of research and development. We got an independent CSIRO looked at it, plus 2 other scientists. So there's a huge document. I shouldn't say huge, I'm being dramatic. It's a booklet. If you want to read it, I can email it to you. Sorry, I tend towards dramatic as well, so it's not huge. Yeah, so the core benefits, also, you know, like a carbon project in, say, Kowanyama, the carbon credits that they create have a cultural, social and economic value automatically attached to it. So what that means, and it's verified. So it's also pushing back on somebody coming into a community and saying, oh yeah, you're doing cultural burning correctly. How would you know? Cultural burning is a birthright. So to have somebody from, you know, sorry, Canberra, come up and say, yes, you're doing cultural burning correctly, it's insulting to the people who are from there. So we push back on that, and it's peer-to-peer. And if we do our job correctly, it will mean they don't even need organisations like the Aboriginal Carbon Foundation. Sorry, did I say where I worked? Okay. I didn't even say where I'm from. Sorry, I'm very proudly an Aboriginal woman. My great-grandmother was born on the banks of Brox Creek up in the Northern Territory. So I have connections there. I have connections in Yarrabah, the Torres Strait. So I'm a mixed bag. My mum's Welsh, so I'm a bit of a mix of everything. I feel like I should go into I like long walks on the beach or something, but I'll move on. Sorry, it's all gone completely... I've been up since 4 o'clock this morning. I don't even know where I am. So what I was saying, sorry, so when the carbon credits are created, it's the only third-party assurance that's embedded with the Queensland Government as the only assurance for those carbon credits. So last year, the Kowanyama community, they have an amazing project out on Oriners and Sefton, and they sold all of their carbon credits to the Commonwealth Bank, which was one of the largest carbon trades in Australia. And the reason big corporates like the Commonwealth Bank, am I doing something wrong? National Bank and other people is because not only do you meet your climate action goals, but through purchasing Indigenous created carbon credits, you also, reconciliation action plans are met, social development goals, you know, social licence to, you know, to operate, all of that sort of stuff is met, you know, through the purchase of those carbon credits. And as a result of that, we can get more money for Indigenous people for those carbon credits because of that additional cultural aspect attached. So carbon credits, you know, they're on the open market and they're about $35 currently. It goes up and down, but we sell them for $59 if they've come out of an Indigenous community because of the value that's attached to those credits. And we tell people all the time, you know, carbon credits aren't a way of making money. The traditional fire practices that the carbon projects are created on, it's birthright, it's through generational stuff, it's not, so when communities, we did a project with Tiwi Islands, every carbon credit that was sold, they wanted to know where it was going because each one created was important to those people. So, yeah, it becomes a whole story. So this one here is a beautiful photo. We do verification training. So what that is we have a cohort of Indigenous people from different communities. So our very first verification in Kowanyama, we brought Indigenous rangers over from Marpoon to verify those carbon credits rather than that Western framework of bringing a consultant. And I don't have a problem with consult. I keep going. My sister up the back is a consultant, but I'm just saying this is traditionally how it's... I'm going to offend a lot of people, I can tell. Yeah, I don't have an issue with consultants, but that's traditionally how it's been done. And, you know, you sit in rooms where people just shrink into themselves in Indigenous communities because they come in and they're made to feel less than because they don't get the jargon. They don't, you know, somebody's coming in and going, oh, no, well, you can't wear those shoes, you're doing it incorrectly. Whereas mob would burn barefoot. You know, oh, no kids can come to the burn. I did a burn with fire sticks last year, and the traditional burn, I carried my granddaughter through it and she slept through it. So there's all these practices on pushing back on what it looks like to people outside of, you know, the traditional sense. So this is a beautiful photo, and this is actually monitoring and evaluation going on, but not in the Western framework. So it's the... You know, the two old boys, Uncle Denny's on the end here, are talking about how they protect rock art up in the Northern Territory, and they record it and it becomes part of the story, and that's what's put in instead of a binder that nobody's going to read. There's these rich stories, and historically too there'll be fights within Indigenous communities because it'll be like, well, Uncle Denny said this was this, and then, no, my mum said this, and Indigenous people can go back and see their old people talk and all of this sort of stuff. So each time we hold this, all of the stories and the recordings that come out of it belong to those communities so that they retain that IP and they share it if they want to. We've also created an app that was built by Little Owl that I'm very interested to talk to you about. It's an evaluation tool that rangers or Indigenous people can download to any smart device. And when they're out on country, they get to determine what they measure, how they evaluate it, who gets access to it. And then when they go into the community and connect to their server, it'll all download, and that server is their property. Even as the creators of the app, we don't have access. They get to hold that knowledge, and then they get to decide what and if they share anything of it. Because, you know, Aboriginal communities in Cape York are researched to death, and they just keep going back and doing the same thing. And we all go, where are all these millions of dollars going? Which I have a few theories about, but that's another story. So it's not going over the same thing. You know, I sat in meeting rooms for 25 years and, you know, lost lots of elders, and nothing was moved because lots of people got rich on just continuing the same conversation and going nowhere. So yeah, this is in Darwin. Where are we? And this is another form of what monitoring and evaluation can look like, instead of your typical classroom kind of somebody stand up the front, which is what I'm doing. But so this is Rachel. So this is Leeton, and this is, so when we go into a community, the first thing we do is, because Indigenous people traditionally, when outsiders from communities come in, you won't get much input because they're worried about their language skills, they're worried about making themselves shame in front of other people. It's getting rid of all of that. So the way that we start our verification, which is 4 days, is we have 80 picture cards that we put on the floor, and we say to people, go round and have a look and see what speaks to you, because what I look at and the story that I might get will be different from what somebody else will get. And it opens up a conversation rather than fill in this form with your name, tell us a bit about yourself, and it automatically sets it up where over the 4 days this beautiful sharing starts. And so this is how we drill down to the core benefits. So carbon projects, whenever we've delivered the training, it's never about, well, this is how much money I want to make. The core benefits come down to, you know, we do a project with Green Fleet with the Cubby Cubby people. They wanted to replant trees so their long-tail possum, which was no longer on their country, came back. We had somebody else, these guys, not Leeton, but up in Darwin, they wanted to bring back a particular honeybee and a kite, like a bird, not a flying kite. You know, so each project never came down to, well, I want $10,000 in my bank. It was always about, well, this is what we want to do. There's a project that we did last year, and the Jabbergai women, which is just outside of Cairns, they were able to get rid of all of the introduced grass to their country and bring back traditional grass, which then allowed them to re-establish and reinvigorate the women's weaving. And now they have a shop in Coranda where they're able to sell that weaving. So there's, you know, we tell people all the time, it's not about the money that's created through a carbon project, it's where that project can actually get you to. Because if you focus on the money, you're going to fail every time. So this is Leeton, and this is how we put a heap of colouring in pencils down, and, you know, an evaluation tree or a core benefits tree is created. And again, that's mob yarning with mob. You draw out people in the room, everybody feels inclusive. Sorry, it sounds like I'm about to cry, but I'm just nervous. You know, you'll see the old guys become obsessed with the glitter pens, and, you know, it takes the nerves out of having to sit there and speak good English. And so you get a much more deeper and richer story, because quite often, you know, organisations will go into communities and they'll produce these binders and go, oh no, we informed them. But 90% of that community didn't understand what was in that report, didn't know what went into it, and there was no time taken. So consultation I always take with a grain of sand. So this is giving empowerment back to the knowledge holders. Okay. And this is a beautiful photo. This is from Kowanyama, and that was the very first time we did the verification. And this is Uncle John Clark, who's a senior traditional man from Kowanyama, and the rangers from Marpoon, who came over and were a part of their cultural burn and signed off on the verification. And then the pool of verified, oh God, I'm sitting too close to something. The pool of verifiers then also have the ability to travel to other people's countries. Sarah, the lady there, she's from Marpoon, and she had family in Kowanyama but hadn't been back there for 30 years. So there's all this beautiful stuff that happens just by reconnecting and allowing that space for how yarns used to happen. And again, if we're doing our job right, they'll be able to have their own verifiers and they won't need us unless they actually say, can you help us with something? So if we're doing our job right, they won't need us. And this is, am I too close? Oh. Oh, am I going over time? Oh, shit. So this is just how we kind of go through it. So this is a cultural fire credit. I have my colleague here, Rachel, who you spoke about yesterday. We do a lot of work with WWF, and after the bushfires in Sydney, we saw a space, and so we created a product that we believe could have an impact on how we would be a part of fixing that. And insurance companies and banks have an interest in the cultural fire credit because they'd much rather invest in the re-establishment of cultural burning than replace 50 houses and all that sort of stuff, which is what they normally do. But this, we just released this on the 30th of June in the Bunya Mountains this year, which we were really excited about, and I'm happy to talk to anybody afterwards. I normally make a lot more sense than this, I promise. So this is where it comes from. The cultural fire credit was a really natural alliance between our two organisations because we work alongside each other. So it was a no-brainer, and WWF is amazing. They funded it for the creation. So this is all it. You were so much better at flicking through things. You did like 10. Oh, did I? Oh, do you want to play the video? Sorry. I feel like I should. There's a video that goes along with it, and we did a video for the Cultural Fire Credit that is an explanation, and I was going to play it, but...
Why don't we play it in the break?
Okay, because she's going to grab me soon, so thank you, but I don't think I'm going to... I meant to be much more efficient than what I am. So this is the logo for the Catalyst Markets, and we're very, very proud of this. It's the first Indigenous trading platform in the world that we created with the Griffith University, with Robert Hale and his team. And what it is a trading platform that can be downloaded to anybody's smart device. And at the moment, if you want to buy carbon credits from us, you've got to do a spot contract, and we've got to trade stuff, and like it's just shit. It's a complicated process. It's a second swear word. Rachel's come. I owe you about $50. But there'll be 6 commodities on there. So there'll be reef credits, blue credits, there'll be the cultural fire credits, there'll be savanna burning, which is the ranger burning. And we've also got farmer credits. So farmers who were traditionally getting kicked off their properties, we work with them. And if they do a carbon project, $60,000 can keep their kids at boarding school and the lights on. So we have farmer credits as well. We do Paru and other places. So this is the logo developed by a local Aboriginal man up near Cairns. I'll tell you about the creation of Catalyst, but anyway. Oh, shoot. So this is Uncle John again, and this is the basis for the Catalyst trading. So it's got a carbon calculator on there, so a student can go in and say, this is what car I drive, this is how many days. It'll give you what you need to purchase to make your travel carbon neutral. You can go onto a project, you can buy those, you get a certificate, and the retirement of it's done all on the app instead of having to contact people. You can give gift certificates to people as a gift for, you know, it makes it much more accessible for people to be carbon neutral. So this is all the stuff that's going to impress you about it. But it's on our website. So if you go onto our website, the Catalyst Market, there's a tab there. They're the commodities that I was talking about. There'll be 6, and it's an ever-changing kind of field. After 2 years, I went, great, I know about carbon credits now, and then they started adding stuff like blue carbon and reef credits, and so it's always changing. Oh, thank you. Sorry, I went way over. But I'm happy to have a conversation about all 3 of those things. We're super passionate, and we really believe that the 3 products that are coming will benefit not only Indigenous people but also, non-Indigenous people as well. It gives us all a chance to be inclusive. Okay, thanks.